The following teaching is possible thanks to the friends and partners of Spirit and Truth Fellowship International.
So we ended our last session with Jesus before the entire Jewish Sanhedrin. That's something we need to pay attention to here. He's going to be tried before the Sanhedrin, and that's going to take time. They're not in a hurry. They want a trial here, and they want Jesus Christ condemned. Then they're going to take Jesus to Pilate. Then Pilate's going to send him to Herod. Then Herod's going to send him back to Pilate. Now, if you have the traditional chronology, then all this has to happen before 9 a.m. And there isn't time for it to happen before 9 a.m., which is why John 19:31 says he's still before Pilate at 12 noon. So we see Jesus was taken before the whole Sanhedrin. And then late Tuesday, after he was condemned, or later Tuesday morning, after he was condemned by the Sanhedrin, the Jewish council, the Sanhedrin, took him to Pilate. So Luke 22 says, they all asked, "Are you the Son of God?" He replied, "You are right in saying I am." Then they said, "Why do we need any more testimony? We've heard it from his own lips." And then Luke 23:1 says, then the whole assembly, this is the whole Jewish council, rose and led him off to Pilate. And that's going to take some time, just getting him across town to Pilate. Later in the morning, he's going to be tried before Pilate now. So Luke chapter 23, verse 4, then Pilate announced to the chief priest and the crowd, "I find no basis for a charge against this man." But they insisted, "He stirs up the people." And then they made an interesting statement. They said, "He started in Galilee and has come all the way here." It says, verse 6, on hearing this, Pilate asked if the man were a Galilean. Verse 7, when he learned that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. Pilate could not have been more pleased. Jesus was a hot potato to him. He didn't want to crucify somebody the day before Passover. He didn't want to risk stirring up the crowd. And so here, all of a sudden, he finds out, wait a minute. This guy's a Galilean. Herod Antipas is the ruler of the Galilee. I'll send him off to Herod. So he does. Now this is all happening Tuesday morning. And Luke 23, you can read the other accounts where when Herod gets Jesus, Herod tried to get Jesus to talk to him, and Jesus would not talk to Herod Antipas. Now, Herod Antipas was the one who'd executed John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin, and Jesus was not going to talk to him. So what happened? They tried to get him to talk before Herod. Finally, Luke 23:11 says, then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him, dressing him in an elegant robe. They sent him back to Pilate. Now, I can imagine that Pilate was very surprised to get Jesus back. I imagine that Pilate thought that I'll send Jesus off to Herod. Herod will be glad to get him. And because, you know, Jesus had done so much work in the Galilee. And Pilate thought, I'll never see this guy again. And the next thing you know, here he is, all dressed up by Herod. And Pilate's like, oh my. So then Herod had to have another trial. Now this is all happening Tuesday morning, except the first time that Jesus was before Pilate, all of the Jewish elders brought Jesus. But now he's being sent back from Herod. The Jewish elders aren't there. So what does the scripture tell us? It says in Luke 23:13, Pilate called together the chief priests, rulers, and the people. Now why did he have to call them together? Because they'd all dispersed after he had sent Jesus to Herod. Now he's got Jesus back, and he's got to gather up all the people again and start the trial. So what time is it by now? It's Tuesday. And what does the scripture say? John chapter 19, verse 14. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover. That means it's the day they're getting ready for the Passover, which would be the next day. It was about the 6th hour. That's our 12 noon. That makes perfect sense. Christ had a daybreak trial before the Sanhedrin. That took time. Then he was tried before Pilate. That took time. Then he was sent to Herod. That took time. Then he was sent back to Pilate. That took time. Then Pilate had to gather up all of the Sanhedrin and then Jewish people. That took time. And so now it's noon. This all makes perfect sense. And then Pilate has this second trial in which he tries to offer Barabbas, he takes Jesus aside, he has him flogged, has him beaten, and so he could maybe try to arouse some pity in the Jewish people. That didn't work, but that all took time. And so then what did Pilate finally do? Pilate finally gave in to the Jewish people and said, okay, I'll crucify him. And then he had to hand him over to the soldiers. And so Mark chapter 15, starting in verse 15, wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Then it says, verse 16, the soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is the Praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. Now this is going to take some time to get together all of the Roman soldiers. Now try to fit this in one day. That if Jesus was, like tradition teaches, if Jesus was arrested on Thursday night, tried before Pilate Friday morning, somehow or other by 9 in the morning, he's got to have gone through a trial before the Sanhedrin, a trial before Pilate, a trial before Herod, a trial before Pilate, and he's got to be handed over to the soldiers who take some time to crucify him, and it's all going to happen before 9 in the morning. It won't. And it didn't. That all happened on Tuesday morning, and Tuesday into the early afternoon, the trial went on, the second trial before Pilate, and then Pilate sends him away to the soldiers who called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a purple robe on him. They twisted a crown of thorns and set it on him. They began to call out, "Hail the King of the Jews." And again they struck him on the head with a staff and spit on him. By the way, he's going through this for you and me. I mean, when you read it, it takes your breath away that Jesus went through this. And he was handed over to the soldiers Tuesday afternoon. He wasn't crucified till Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock. They beat him and tortured him through the entire night. So now the soldiers, like I say, they put a robe on him, they beat on him. And then Mark chapter 15, verse 25, well, you can even read verse 20. When they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe, put his own clothes on him. They led him out to crucify him. Mark 15:25. It was the third hour when they crucified him. And so now if you look at the chart, you can see kind of the progression here of what's going on. Jesus Christ had his Last Supper on Monday night. Then he was arrested, sent before Annas, then Caiaphas, then Tuesday morning before the entire Sanhedrin, then to Pilate, trial before Herod, back to Pilate. The soldiers have him all night long and torture him, and then 9 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday morning, Jesus is crucified. And we go back to the scripture. He's crucified, and verse 33 of Mark chapter 15, at the 6th hour, darkness came over the whole land until the 9th hour. The 6th hour is 12 noon. So from 9 in the morning until 12 noon, Christ was hanging on the cross. Then at 12 noon, darkness came over the land, and that came over the land until the 9th hour. And then the scripture tells us, at the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Verse 37 of Mark chapter 15, with a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last, and then it says it was the preparation day, that is, the day before the Sabbath. And again, when it makes that statement, it was the day before the Sabbath, that's where people get confused and think, oh, it must be Friday. But it's not Friday, and I'll show you why.